Hi, welcome to the Steministas channel. If you don't know, the Steministas brand is dedicated to empowering, connecting, and recognizing women in STEM. For those of you who don't know, Anjali Roychowdhury is a graduate student at Stanford University with a passion for making cool things go fast. And from leading and now in orbit optical communication satellite payload projects to co-founding a group at school trying to launch a rocket off a balloon, Anjali loves pursuing projects and ideas that push her boundaries of what is possible. Professionally, she's worked on several cutting-edge technologies, including autonomous vehicles, SpaceX's Crew Dragon, and most recently, ABL Space Systems' first launch vehicle. Furthermore, she's so grateful to the mentorship she's received, who have pushed her to be her best self and have opened and created opportunities for her. Anjali strives to pay that forward to create a more inclusive industry to build a better future. So I just really want to start with like your background in STEM and like how you just like an overview of like how did you kind of get to knowing your passion, like knowing your passion for STEM and knowing your passion in STEM. So yeah.
Cool. Starting with the easy questions.
You know?
I don't know. I don't know if there was any sort of like magical moment. There were just like small things that kind of nudged me in this direction. So when I was younger, both my parents are huge nerds. And so they would put on the Discovery Channel and the History Channel back when it was good all the time. And so we watched a lot of how it's made, the space documentaries online, those kinds of things. And it was just like a really cool experience. So I think when I was really little, I was really into space. I was really into taking things apart. I think I went to a summer camp where they were like, "Oh, you could bring in like something from home to like take this apart." And I don't know if I did this with permission or not, but I brought in our like blender and then took apart our blender at camp. And it's important to note that I didn't know enough to put it back together. And blenders are also really sharp, so I like ended up getting like a really tiny like nick on my hand. But I was like so excited to be like, oh, like that's how that works. Like we have these sharp things, and there's a motor, and the motor runs, and all of that. But then I think as I got a little bit older, for a lot of reasons, I started feeling like maybe engineering and STEM weren't really for me. A little bit because I think that's sort of how we socialize our young women. And I just, and also a little bit because I don't know if I've ever been interested just in engineering. Like, I think curiosity is what's really driven me more than a love of like a particular thing. So I started looking into just a bunch of stuff. I wanted to be a fashion designer, and then I wanted to study genetics. And then I kind of converged on like diplomacy and like going to law school and all of that. And that's kind of where I was at the end of high school, is I was pretty dead set on like studying like economics and international relations, and then going to law school after and working for the foreign service and just all of that. At some point my senior year, an engineer from Blue Origin came to speak at our high school, and she gave a really, really passionate speech on how engineering also allows us to build the world that we want to see, and how that's also a very significant way to make a very large amount of impactful change. And I was like, oh, that seems cool. And I was like, all right, I'll take an engineering class when I get to college, and now we're here.
Yes, no, I completely relate. I relate so hard to that story because I also used to take things apart as a child. I I used to take apart like small things from like calculators and stuff, and then they like took apart like cell phones because I was like trying to also figure out like how to make something cool out of like just putting. I just figured, well, if I just put these things together, then like maybe it will make something cool, but that's where my interest in STEM came from. um, And then I also did deviate a little bit because I didn't want to be just boxed into the box of engineering because I had so many interests where for a time I wanted to be a farmer, for a time I wanted to be a teacher, for a time I was like like just like a bunch of different professions that I like really hardcore thought about. I thought about law school for a while too as well. But in my culture and society, I was nudged towards engineering, but I did love engineering, so it worked out for me. Um, but yeah, so I definitely relate to that experience. So how did you like land on aerospace engineering? Which was that what you studied in undergrad, by the way? I'm actually not even sure.
Same. So you're in good company. So in undergrad, I studied mechanical engineering and a little bit of computer science, but I think I was always interested in space when I was younger, of like all the engineering things. It was just so cool to me to be able to look up and see things. That makes any sense? Like it's just really captivating as like a frontier. So I was always interested in aerospace. When I got to college, I joined an aerospace engineering group on campus, and so kind of dug in there. The first two companies I worked at though were in autonomous vehicles, so I branched out a little bit, and then worked at SpaceX, and I'm now at another aerospace launch company. So I don't know. I mean, like I really, really enjoy aerospace, but I don't know for sure if that's like what that's going to be it forever. You know?
So if looking at the stars is what sparked the passion, what like drove you? You know, what maintains the passion for where you're at now, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, I think part of it is that like I really enjoy narratives and stories. Like I think English was always my favorite class in high school and growing up, and writing has always been like a passion of mine. And the narratives that we as a society build around space are very strong and very compelling. So whether that's the whole JFK NASA get to the moon Apollo program, whether it's the way we now talk about the Hubble, the way that as a country we have been recently captivated by like SpaceX and like Crew Dragon. Like I think we just really put a lot of emphasis on space, and a lot of it's like very much so deserved. Like I think space in a lot of ways isn't really just about like the rockets and the satellites. It's all the different things you can do with it. So space is a huge part of climate change research through satellite imagery. Space has been a huge part in tracking one of my favorite examples of this is space was a really big part in tracking like the refugee crisis, especially like the Syrian refugee crisis, because you could, as well as like the caravan from a little while ago, because we now take images every single day of like every square meter of the Earth, and so through those images you can actually track really interesting phenomenon and like prepare accordingly. Like, oh, like we can see like crop yields are turning out this way, or we can see that people are moving in this direction, or weather is moving this way, et cetera, et cetera. And like the more information, more localized information you're getting from those things, the more things you can do with that. Whether that like informs the way we make policy about how we're going to handle our borders, whether that informs the way that we grow and distribute food, whether that informs like how do you prepare for a hurricane. There are so many facets in which space enables us to build a better future on Earth itself. So it's cool.
That was beautiful. That was amazing. I love that. Yes, that was so in your bio, you kind of talk about how you co-founded a group at school trying to launch a rocket off a balloon. And I kind of want to like delve into that a little bit because even just reading that, I was like, what? First of all, really cool idea if it's like even like possible, but it even sounds so like innovative and like out of this world. Like, what was that experience like? How did you even think of that idea? You know, like, yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was a project that was really only possible to do as a student organization. I mean, to be frank, like launching a rocket off of a balloon, like the reason why you would want to do that is if you can't afford to build a rocket big enough to get to a high altitude on its own merit. And so what you do is you elevate it really high off the ground so that it has the so for example, when you launch from hypothetically 28 kilometers, the atmosphere that you have to launch through is 92% thinner than before. So your rocket needs to be like, it doesn't need to be as powerful. Consequently, it doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be hard to develop. It can literally be something you just buy online, which is great because it really reduces engineering effort. And if you were a real company who could actually employ real adults who actually know how to do engineering and had money, it is not a good idea because it's the dynamics, like the physical dynamics of launching your rocket off of a balloon are sort of a hellhole. And so if you can avoid doing that, it's better. NASA actually was really into launching rockets off of balloons in the 50s. So it's in no way it's not our idea. It's just, it was retired. And so they did it pretty successfully a few times and it worked out for them. And then they built better rockets and they were like, we're never dealing with this again. And so for us as a student org, it was appealing because we didn't have the time to develop or didn't have the time and energy to want to develop like a liquid rocket engine at that scale. And it's also harder to get your school administration to be like, we promise we're not going to kill anyone. It's fine. Just a little fire. And so it really perfectly fit our needs and was a problem that I think we were aware no one would pay us to work on this. And so being able to like use our funds as like student organization to work on something that was a really interesting problem, but maybe not like, it's never the right solution for like any sort of research or commercial application. So it's just kind of like a thing where we were like, this could be really neat. And we just kind of did it. For the record, it hasn't worked successfully yet. So,
That was a question.
yeah. I think we thought we were going to be able to do it in a year. That was bold. But yeah, I mean, admittedly, some of that development effort has like slowed down a little bit because it's harder to get together in person and build a rocket in the middle of the pandemic. So there's that too.
That's true. That is true. Co-founding that group though, working on it during your undergrad as a woman of color in STEM, did you experience any do you feel like your experience would have been different, for example, if you were like, a white man instead co-founding that group, running that group, like how was that the dynamics? What was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways pretty easy for me to like make the comparison. I co-founded the team with a white man, and so just like being able to see, okay, so a lot of this came from I think I mean, my degree is in dynamics and controls. And so that's kind of what I do. It's what I really enjoy doing. It's what I am being paid to do. And so I think I'm good at it. But it was just really frustrating where my co-founder would pitch certain ideas to the group. And so underneath us, we had like little sub teams. And basically, everyone who led one of those sub teams was a very confident man. And so I was almost always the only woman in that room, which is, I guess, normal at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just frustrating where he would pitch an idea that like would be like a reasonable idea. Like my co-founder was like pretty smart too, like, solid dude, and he would like pitch these ideas, and everyone would be like, "Oh my god, wow! Like that's great! Like we should definitely try that." And then I would, I think, offer some feedback and be like, we can build on that idea by like incorporating this and this. So it's like a little bit more structurally sound. And then like a lot of people in the room would be like, oh, but like Anjali, like, did you do the math? Like, how do you know that? Like, and all of this stuff. And it was just, it was kind of like a death by a thousand cuts situation where it was just a little exhausting to have every single thing I said be questioned, even as I like had the most experience in the group and was also leading the group. Uh, but learning experience.
Yeah, that is quite frustrating to obviously be running the group and have the experience and have people questioning your experience. It's so crazy because when I started at my job, I was like so not necessarily. I would say I was definitely way more quiet and like more reluctant to speak up because I felt kind of like intimidated, even though I like out of the like equipment engineers, which is like I was an equipment engineer when I started. I had like I was the only one with a master's degree, and like my boss is like, you need to speak up. You need to speak up more. Like you need to feel like you belong. I was so grateful to have a boss like being like championing me, being like, you need to like feel like you belong, like know that your words like would be heard and you have value in what you're saying. And so it's like extremely, I can imagine, because like that was my fear, that like I would speak up and people would not hear me. And then I did get on a team with somebody that, you know, started to like not hear me. And that was it's an experience by itself. But yes, it's definitely very frustrating and something that I feel like a lot of us women in STEM, especially women of color, I feel like can relate to. But from that experience, what would you say was like your biggest lesson? Your biggest lesson?
So I think the lesson was honestly just to leave when things became unworkable. I think there is a lot of value in like trying to stay and like improve a situation. But so I worked on this project between sophomore spring, so like the March of my sophomore year through like February of my junior year. So about a year total, and it's still going, and I'm not really involved anymore. I like, you know, keep in touch with people, so I know what's happening, but I'm not at all involved technically. I think I spent a lot of effort trying to have discussions with people and be like, hey, like I need you to take my ideas more seriously because there are a lot of really good reasons why I'm explaining them, but it is tiring for you to like question my credentials every single time I talk because I'm running this for a reason and I need you to know that. And those conversations I think would like help, like people would be like a little bit better for like a week and then they would go back to like their old bullshit. And I think I stayed probably too long. And so I think I just realized I was in an environment that wasn't supporting me and I was spending so much more of my energy trying to get people to believe me that I was actually growing as an engineer. That oh wait, did you freeze? Okay. That I just kind of left. And I was so much happier on the other end of it. I think taking a break from an environment which was just tiring was really good for me and it allowed me to spend more time on personal projects and spend more time with like on other engineering teams where I felt heard and supported and cared for. I could spend more time on class. I mean, there were so many other things that were in my life. And I think I felt like I couldn't leave, even though there was like nothing holding me there. Like I wasn't even being paid. It's like a volunteer student organization. Like there's no contract, there's nothing. I just always felt like I couldn't leave. And it was I had a conversation with one of my friends about just feeling like trapped. And she was like, you can walk out at any point. And I was like, oh, I did not know that. And so I just kind of left and it was great.
Yes, and like there's so much power in standing up for yourself and leaving. Because like, you're taking your own power and taking, you're putting your mental health above whatever kind of idea or thing that's like keeping you tethered to this thing. And it's something that I'm always proud, like because I have a number of friends. I kind of talked about it a little bit in the last episode. I have a number of friends who like were unhappy with their jobs, and like I think a couple of them, I want to say maybe one or two of them have had like the confidence and like the power to leave. And like a couple of them are like trying to get their things in order to be able to leave. And I'm like, I'm so proud of them because I'm like, I know a lot of people too who are unhappy in their situations, who are like also just unable to be able to take that step right now, which is also understandable. But it's like, there's power in being able to be like, I'm done and I'm prioritizing myself and I need to go somewhere where my skills and my talents will be appreciated. And so, yes, very, very inspiring. So how did you get involved in working in autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, kind of through being a little in the right place at the right time. So I think as a freshman, I led a satellite project to build an optical communication satellite, which was also an experience. But as a result, I was working with lenses all the time, a lot of lenses and optics. And so one of the main lens manufacturers, they're called Thor Labs. This is in no way an endorsement of them. They make good products, but this is not an official endorsement. But they send you, it's so funny. So the lenses you buy from them are like a few $1,000s. And so they're very expensive. And then they send you little Thor snacks. They send you like a little cardboard box with like free snacks in them. And the snacks, they're like goldfish, like it can't be more than like $1 worth of snacks in like a 20-cent cardboard box. But it is so exciting to open a box and just be like food. And so everyone like loves these snacks and loves Thor Labs for their Thor snacks. Recently, I think they upgraded to granola, which I actually am very upset by. Like, I really enjoyed like the Snickers bar and goldfish situation. But I was walking around a career fair at Stanford that I like kind of went to on like a whim, and this company was there, and they had a Thor Lab box with Thor snacks in it, and I, being not significantly evolved from a lizard, was like food, and so just like walked towards it and I was like, "Are those Thor snacks? Can I have one?" And this dude was like, yeah. And he was like, do you work in optics? Because they only make lenses. And I was like, yeah, I'm leading the satellite project. And I was like, I want the goldfish, please. And he was like, oh, cool. Tell me more. So I ended up having this long conversation with him about my career. And it was entirely motivated by me trying to get to these goldfish. And afterwards, I like gave him my resume, and he reached out to me the next day and was like, let's set up like a formal interview. And the company basically made LiDAR sensors for autonomous vehicles. And so LiDAR are sort of the way they work is they spin. Not all of them. Many of them spin, and they have like little lasers, and the lasers like shoot out, and the signal bounces off of something and comes back to a receiver. And because how fast light moves, you can tell how far things are. So they're super useful for getting like 3D images of the world around you for any autonomous application. But they're expensive, and so they're primarily used in like autonomous vehicles. I think actually the Dragon capsule, like SpaceX's Dragon capsule, uses LiDARs to like nest with the ISS. But yeah, so anyhow, so I ended up working at that company. It was super cool. I got really into sensors, and then I worked at Lyft the next summer because I think Lyft was somehow like considering that first company's sensors at some point. So they were on my radar. I like reached out to a recruiter and was like, hey, I'm interested in working here. Interviews, got hired, worked there.
That's amazing. That's so cool. So how was your experience at Lyft? Were you also working on sensors at Lyft, or?
Yeah, actually, I was also working on sensors. I really like them. Yeah, it was great. I was on the mechanical engineering team, but most of my work was actually closer to what one of their software teams, their perception team did. So that was fun. But yeah, so I like worked on validating some sensors that they got, and then started building a model where you could like put in, it was like a ray tracing algorithm. So it was like very deep in like CS graphics land. But you basically could like put in different sensors and it would give you like a fidelity of like how accurately they could like sense an object. So it's super useful for Lyft specific application, because you could be like, oh, like I want to put these sensors in this place in the car and this different type of sensor over here, and like let's like simulate like a toddler walking by. Like, can our car sense toddlers and things like that? And so it's nice to be able to get that information virtually, because you can just adjust rather than being in a situation where you like hit a toddler and you're like, oh wait, we can't see them. So pretty good.
Yeah. That sounds really useful. So, was it your love of like just innovation and like a desire to just gain more knowledge that drove you to grad school, or like what made you think about going to grad school?
So there's two halves of that question. The first is there just isn't enough time to take all the classes that I wanted to take in undergrad, and there were more things that I wanted to learn. And some of those things are pretty hard to learn on your own or on a job, like especially like the really math intensive classes. Like, I'm not going to learn that at work. Like, I'm always going to find like the easiest way out, because that's what's time efficient. So there's that. The other thing is being a minority in STEM, it is sometimes nice to be able to have very objective, concrete credentials to be like, not only am I qualified, I am qualified by 2 degrees. So please believe me, or, get lost. And so I think like there's like definitely a growing movement to like not do grad school within the aerospace industry itself, because like work experience is pretty valuable and you do learn a lot in the process of actually working that you might not in school itself. Like, school is very theoretical, at least Stanford is. And so there's definitely like some of that push. And I think that's maybe like a closer choice to make if you were a white man who is not questioned as often, but as a woman of color who's questioned all the time, it made a lot of sense for me to get that second degree. And Stanford has like a system in which it becomes actually like very financially accessible to do grad school. You can work on your master's degree while you're still in undergrad, so you like don't have to pay for as much grad school, which is really nice. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely relate to that. I also kind of like got my master's, well, for both, in that like I wanted to get more in-depth knowledge in like the topics that I really cared about. And that I knew it would definitely make me more, I'm not sure what the word is here. I guess people would value my opinion more in the workplace, given my master's degree. And hopefully, I plan to go back to get a PhD next year. So we'll hopefully that should gain more respect, or at least definitely more knowledge.
Yeah.
But you really emphasized loving mentorship in your bio, and how much mentorship has benefited your life. And so I just wanted to kind of talk to you about that. How did you kind of get into mentorship? Because I honestly, it's hard to find a mentor. I think everybody talks about how like they have so many mentors, and I'm like, where do you guys find your mentors?
Yeah.
So yeah, and also like talk a little bit about like the role that mentorship has played.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of my mentors have found me, which has been I'm very grateful for that. So when I was in high school, I was a senior, and one of my, this engineer, Erica, came to speak to our high school about like innovation and stuff like that. And she is the sister-in-law of my AP US history teacher. And so I like mentioned to my teacher, I was like, oh, like Erica was really cool. And she was like, oh, like, do you want to get to know her? And I was like, yeah, do you know her? She's like, yeah, just come over for like dinner sometime. You can like meet her. And so Erica's been in my life for years, actually, as a result. And she's been a phenomenal mentor. And I mean, like, has really done a lot to like shape my career. Like, I mean, she's a big part of why I'm in aerospace or like in engineering to begin with. My high school robotics coach, Mrs. Lamb, was a big mentor of mine. So I did robotics in high school. I never thought of myself as an engineer, but there's a lot to unpack there for maybe another time. But Mrs. Lamb was really a really good advocate for me and really helped me figure out like what my boundaries were and how to push back when I felt like they were being crossed, because unsurprisingly, our high school robotics team was very male dominated. And she was it made a world of difference to have a woman I really looked up to who really was looking out for me. And then I think the last like significant mentor in my life is I became a part of the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship last year. And so Steve Isakowitz, who runs the fellowship, has been like a very powerful mentor for me because he's just he's seen a lot of so that's part of it. But he's just like a very thoughtful advocate who I think has done a really good job of showing me what it means to like really look out for someone, and that he spends a lot of energy understanding where I'm coming from in the process of giving me advice. And I think that makes like a world of difference, because there's a lot of generic advice in the world, and sometimes it is nice to hear that from a human and sort of like WikiHow, but it is, I think, very meaningful to get advice from someone who is really trying to like push you to be your best self. So I guess like the ways that I got involved in mentorship as like, sorry, I think there's a motorcycle on my street. The ways I got involved in mentorship as a mentor have been kind of also accidental. Like there have been a little accidental, a little intentional. So part of that student organization I was in on campus, there would be women who would join, and I like made it a point to like reach out to them when they join and be like, oh, hey, like, let's get coffee sometime. And mostly that was just because I think like, it would have made like a very big difference to me to have like a strong women's network when I joined the organization. And so I really wanted to be able to build that for future generations. And so I really got to know a lot of younger women that way. And I think like serve in some capacity between friend and mentor to them, depending on the day. But I think that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I do agree. That's absolutely how it should be. We only have about 10 minutes left, but we have 10 minutes left for the audience to ask some questions. So thank you so much, by the way, for being here, for sharing your story. There was a lot of things in your background. You've had a lot of experiences, and you've done a lot of really cool things. And I'm really glad that you took the time to share your story with us. So
Thank you.
Hey there. I actually had a question.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Anjali. So I was wondering, when you were talking about that, the project you were leading in undergrad, I was just kind of curious, I guess, what your confidence level was when you entered that. With your coursework, did you feel like pretty confident about what you were getting into? Did you know that there would be things you didn't know that you need to research? I was just kind of curious. I don't know a little bit more about your comfortability with taking that project on, because I know, I guess the main reason I'm asking is trying to assess my comfortability getting involved in more aerospace type projects, because I'm mechanical engineering undergrad right now, and just, I guess, trying to assess, how to get involved with those things, even though I just feel like I know nothing.
Yeah. Definitely a big question. I think a lot of that So like the first piece of advice is pretty much everyone in any sort of collegiate engineering project has like, no one knows what they're doing. And so it's just some people don't know what they're doing, but can talk loudly. But it's really important to not conflate like people who speak confidently with people who actually know what's going on. I say that as someone who definitely does project themselves as confident to be heard sometimes. So like it's a tactic that you yourselves can also manipulate if you want to. I think so. That wasn't my first engineering project in undergrad though. And so the first thing that I worked on was this optical communication satellite. And I ended up through like a series of unfortunate or fortunate events, depending on how you look on it, starting to lead the project January of my freshman year. So I had just turned 18 and suddenly was in charge of 30 people and 35 grand, and had a satellite due in 9 months, which is definitely a trial by fire experience. And so a lot of that project was challenging for me. My co-lead for that project straight up ghosted me like a few months in because I called him out on saying some kind of sexist things. And then he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I said that," and then just like blocked me. And so that was fun. And so a lot of that I think really taught me. It was also hard as a project because I was like the youngest person involved and one of two women involved with the project. So being like a young woman is kind of a rough starting place sometimes. I really did not hold many cards in technical authority, and for that project especially, like I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was like, I don't know, 3 months into undergrad, like I didn't know how to build things. I'd never sent a part out to manufacturing before. I didn't know what a lens was. I didn't know what any of these parameters were. And so part of that was me like going out of my way to find professors who I thought would help me, and like learning as much as I could, as fast as I could. And that was something I did in the time. But the lesson that first project taught me was to start setting my boundaries really early and really firmly. Because if I got, I think, walked over a few times in the course of the satellite project. And I think that really taught me that I couldn't just expect people to treat me with respect and kindness. The summary of that is like, don't be afraid to ask for help from people, from the resources that you have in your community, whether that's professors or friends or mentors or older students. Like it's perfectly normal to not feel like you know what you're doing, because I don't really think anyone at any point ever really does. And the second is, if you feel like you like, figure out what your boundaries are and feel free to like enforce and push for them. Like that's maybe the only way they'll be respected.
Yes. So, yeah. I absolutely love that and absolutely agree with that. That's something I've been learning for definitely hardcore for like the past how long have I been working now? I've been working full time since March last year. And that's definitely something that I've been learning a lot since I started working, learning how to set boundaries. And it's definitely something I'm still working on all the time, because I kind of grew up also in an environment where it's encouraged for you to be like the more you're able to do things for people, like the more you're praised and stuff. And so it's hard to learn how to say no to people. And then when you're at work, that gets draining very quickly. So I've definitely had to like learn a little like over time how to like my limits and how to be like no and firmly be firm about that. And like especially when I look around me and like my male coworkers are like so good at it, I'm like, but yes, thank you so much for once again for sharing your story. Thank you everyone for joining. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry that we didn't have more time for questions. Yeah, I appreciate everybody. And as Anjali said, you can reach her on LinkedIn if you have any more questions. Like, subscribe, turn on your post notifications, leave a comment, leave a heart, let me know how you feel. So you definitely want to be subscribed to the channel to know when the episodes are coming out. But of course,
course, also follow us on our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On Facebook and Instagram,